listening audience, welcome back, and thanks again for accessing our content and making us part of your day, because we know that you can spend this time anytime that you like, or any way that you like, I should say, and that you choose to listen to us is very humbling, and we want to honor that with some good content. And like usual, we have a really stellar guest. His name is Joe Bartozzi, and he heads up the National Shooting Sports Foundation, otherwise known as NSSF. And you may have heard of NSSF if you're in the gun community, because they're a pretty big heavyweight. They host SHOT Show and do a lot of other things. And I'm going to let Joe talk about himself, because he's better at doing it than I am, because he's him and I am not. So, Joe, welcome, and glad you could make it.
Well, thank you, Jake, and thanks, Mike, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys, and Mike, always good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
So tell everybody who you are, please, and give us a robust introduction, if you will, and maybe explain a little bit of what NSSF does and why we should pay attention.
I am the president and CEO of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and we are the Firearm Industry Trade Association. And I like to tell people that, our role, among other things, is to advocate on behalf of the industry, to generate interest in the business, the taxes, the jobs, all the things that the industry creates. And we look at this like there's about a $90 billion economic activity with the firearm industry, and it creates about 400,000 plus American jobs. And we take that role as the advocates for the industry very seriously. We also do a lot in the education field, compliance education, things that are important to our industry business-wise, as well as compliance-wise, regulatory-wise. We do a lot of webinars and education content at SHOT Show and at other events around the country throughout the year. So we do an awful lot of education. We also communicate our First Shots programs, National Shooting Sports Month. We get proclamations from a number of governors in support of the shooting sports, especially during the month of August. So we do an awful lot of getting the message out for our members on behalf of our members around the country.
What does the membership comprise when you're talking about who is a member of NSSF? Is it individuals or companies or retailers or wholesalers? Like what is this membership?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jake. I should have clarified that. We are an organization that does not have individual members per se, like more or less just like the NRA or Ducks Unlimited, where they have individual consumer type members. Our members are manufacturing companies, distributors, shooting ranges, gun shops. We've got thousands and thousands of retailers, firearm retailers that are members of NSSF. We also have some media folks that are members with their organizations. So we're not particularly well known in the consumer world, but in terms of the industry, we focus and take that very seriously, of focusing on staying in our lane of supporting the industry. Everything that we do every day is on behalf of the industry that we serve, and we let the industry then get to their consumers. Those are their customers, not ours. So our job is we take care of industry takes care of their customers, and that's kind of how I would best describe that, Jake.
I appreciate that. Hang on a second, Mike. I'm going to let my curiosity take over, because I get to ask people questions that I don't normally get to talk to.
I hear you. I'm excited for Joe. I mean, this is a great guest.
This is cool for me. I love talking to people who are part of groups like this, because it's a strange concept to most of us. We don't get to see the behind the scenes machinations of advocacy groups that act on behalf of industries. And it seems to me that could be as broad of an umbrella as you want, or as narrow as you want. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me for a minute, just like on some of the stuff that like the consumers like me might not be aware of. Is it policy? Is it regulatory compliance? Is it all of it? Like how can I make sense of this as just a random run of the mill person who doesn't have a manufacturing company?
We try to be very flexible in terms of what happens, and of course a lot of it's based upon what's happening politically. What's the climate in the market? So there are some years when, for example, our members tell us we need more customers. So what we do is we go into programs like First Shots and we get people to get out there and take their first shots with a firearm. That's a nationwide program that we host at various members around the country, and it draws in people that have never shot before, gives them safety training, eye and ear protection, lets them take their first shot at their first target. So but also, for example, we talk about advocacy. We've got state government relations folks positioned around the country that deal with state legislatures. We try to stop bad legislation, and we try to pursue and encourage good legislation. That is legislation that would be supportive of our industry. We have an office on Capitol Hill in D.C., and we have folks that frequently go to members of Congress to carry the message of our industry. And truthfully, NSSF has become a go-to trusted source for members of Congress that want to know, hey, how will it affect the jobs in my community, in my jurisdiction, in my district? And we have economic data that we provide, and we run surveys constantly throughout the year on particularly economic activity, jobs creation, and so on and so forth. So there's so many different things that we do. And then, of course, you talked about the SHOT Show. We have a market there where people come from 100 different countries, I should say, so from all around the globe, to experience the American market, the best products that are being put out by our manufacturing members. That's all on display again, it's a business-to-business show, so it's not a consumer thing, but that's part of our communication and outreach, is to get the world to know, hey, there's a great group of suppliers here in the U.S., and they'd love to contract with you to sell their products across the world. And that's what the SHOT Show helps to facilitate. So there's Import-Export Conference on regulatory compliance. We've got a leadership and marketing summit. We have a range retail expo that focuses on the technology for running a range, whether it's ventilation systems, target systems, you name it, hearing protection, OSHA compliance. There's a lot of different things. We have so many things that are kind of like affecting the industry from so many different aspects. It's really hard to pinpoint one thing, and I've got just a great team here that are specialists in a variety of areas. So like maybe my knowledge is an inch deep and a mile wide, but we have true experts on staff that are responsive to the industry 24/7, 365.
That's really cool. And if I may, you mentioned something in there about how you're the trusted go-to source for congressional representatives and their staffers. And I'm thinking of in Nevada, we have a company called Polymer 80 that produces 80% complete lowers. They're unserialized, and it's basically a kit. It's a brick of plastic that's formed like a gun. And for the unknowing audience, you drill out your own holes basically and buy the parts that you want to go into this firearm. At one point, there was some legislation that was going to ban unserialized, or what they would call ghost guns, which I think is a pejorative term, but my opinion aside, that would impact jobs because Polymer 80 would have effectively had to shut down. Is that something to which legislators could go to you guys and say, what's the impact of this type of policy and legislation? Is that something you would advise on?
Yeah, we certainly would get involved in that, and we have gotten involved in that. Obviously, in the U.S., since prior to the founding of the country, the ability to manufacture your own firearms for your own use has never been prohibited. However, now we see with the framer-receiver rule that the ATF put forward, they're making it difficult, if not impossible, under circumstances to do that. So we've been in contact with folks to say, hey, this could be a problem. Here are the issues, and we are maybe not at the forefront. We do a lot behind the scenes, depending on what the issue is, so as to we don't want to create any undue problem for any of our members or any of these companies like Polymer 80, but there's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see. But certainly we are very well aware of the situation, and we're working it perhaps not as overtly as some other groups are, but we're there nonetheless.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That helps a lot, and I think it paints a much better picture of what NSSF does for all people who are involved, not just the companies, but the consumers of the products of those companies, because we're all impacted as well. So thank you for that.
For
Mike,
sure.
Jim, something there?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say it. I like that you said a lot that happens behind the scenes because we say that exact same thing here at Walk the Talk America. We are constantly saying there's a fight going on. I wouldn't even say it's a fight, right? But there are conversations with organizations that some people would be like, I can't even believe you guys are talking to them or showing up in the same circles. And I think it's important. And I've always felt good because there have been times when I've been invited to something, and then on the screen, Bill's there too, right? And I'm like, oh, good, I have an ally.
Yeah.
I have NSSF here with me, right? I'm not the only person from the firearms industry with the values and our belief systems that we have. But I want to kind of go back because this is going to be about NSSF for sure, right? There's so much to ask, but I kind of want to go back about you personally. When I first met you, I remember talking to you about, like, we both kind of were sharing our story of coming up in the industry. And I was talking about, how I got my job through nepotism and I came up and I did everything from like run and get sandwiches to, shipping in the warehouse. And I talked about having to go find the tracers that would come in from the ATF, right? And you were like, oh my God, I remember that, doing that too, right?
Yep.
And we were sharing the story. So can we go back and just kind of tell your origin stories? Because I always say the people in the industry really don't change. It's the banner behind them. And here you are now at this, like, what I consider a top level, but you came up doing all kinds of things for this industry.
Yeah, it's kind of a for me an odd story, but I would start from the very beginning. As a young child, I had a connection to the industry that was profound and emotional, and that is my maternal grandfather, that is my mother's father, worked for 38 years at the Winchester Repeating Arms Company in New Haven here in Connecticut. And ever since a young boy, he did not have guns. He never talked about hunting or shooting or anything like that, but he had a gold tie clip that was in the shape of a Winchester Model 94 that he was never without. That was always like part of his thing, right? As a kid growing up. So there was this connection immediately to the gun industry, even though I didn't get it at the time. So that was kind of like emotional connection, which I think was probably the basis for a lot that followed. I was working at a company in Bridgeport in the early 1980s, and they had customers that included Ruger in Southport, when their factories in Southport, and Winchester in New Haven. And because my boss knew that I was a gun guy, because I was involved in trap shooting at that time, and he put me on the Winchester and the Ruger accounts, and I got to go to the Winchester factory many times. The old factory is just now long gone. But to say that I walked the same halls that my grandfather did and smelled the smells of the cutting oil and heard the sounds, and it was like this instant, like, wow, this is where he worked for all these years. And I guarantee you, even though I didn't ask at the time, there were people at that factory that worked with him. And I was a young kid, and had a job that I had to do. But I wish I had asked around, because I probably would have met people that knew my grandfather. So there was this emotional connection. And then fast forward to 1986, Mossberg was looking for a quality engineer. And in my career path, I was doing quality supervision, but I wanted to evolve into a quality engineering role, and Mossberg gave me the opportunity. So I was working in the shop at Mossberg on process control, capability studies, all sorts of quality related issues to the Mossberg product line. And from there, it just, my career changed and evolved over 32 years that I spent at Mossberg. When I left Mossberg, I was executive vice president and general counsel. So I went to law school at night while I worked at Mossberg, and did all, like, everything from doing traces for the ATF to basically anything that needed to get done in the shop. I was that guy that was out there, fixing guns, assembling guns, testing guns, doing endurance tests when government contracts came in. It was whatever had to get done got done, and I can't say enough good things about the Mossberg family and what they did for my career. They believed in me, and they gave me opportunities that I was able to I think take advantage of appropriately.
Are you an engineer then by trade, and then you became an attorney later?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a certified quality engineer. It's not not design engineering, but I design processes for quality systems. So statistical process control, again, capability studies, it's kind of boring stuff unless you're a geek out by quality engineering like I am. But like we would go, there's a machine cell running, making triggers or hammers or whatever it was, and if the dimensions were not stable for whatever reason, then it affected you downstream when you got to assembly. Then the parts would get rejected at assembly and have to go back for rework. So my job was to go in and say, okay, what's going on here? How could we improve the process, either through gauging, through fixturing, cutting tools, whatever it is, and how do I make that process more reliable, more robust, so that we don't have problems downstream? And of course, that then translates to a more smoother operation when you get to assembly, but also it translates to a better customer experience if the product is made to spec and is tested appropriately. That was all my responsibility, is to make sure the tests were appropriate, safety testing, drop testing, accuracy, all that stuff. So I loved it. I loved the manufacturing process. I loved being involved even in the design phase. I actually am listed on 4 patents because of things that I was able to kind of work on and develop as part of that inner circle in the quality field, and working directly with engineers and consumers, frankly, to make a better product.
What got you interested in law?
Yeah, because I was basically running the quality function for Mossberg for a number of years. When there was an allegation of, well, say someone would say, "Oh, I got hurt because of this shotgun or this rifle or whatever," the lawyers would put me up for a deposition. They would put me basically on the stand and say, "Okay, tell us about the quality system. Tell us about the quality function. How do you run these tests?" and so on and so forth. So I kind of got involved with outside counsel for Mossberg and in-house counsel for Mossberg as a witness for the company. And it turns out about 1996 or 97, I was plant manager. I'd been promoted to plant manager, still responsible for quality, but now also shipping and manufacturing and everything else. But I got a call from Ivor Mossberg. I was on a business trip. I was down in Texas. I get a call, and Ivor's like, "Hey, listen, our current general counsel, she's great and she's doing all this great work. But we want, when she eventually retires, whenever that is, we want a smooth transition to the next general counsel. Would you be interested in that role?" And I was like floored. I was blown away, because I was the non-traditional student that went to night school for years and years, and I had just gotten clear of that. And I called my wife and said, "I'm going back to school at night." And my wife and 3 kids back in Connecticut, I'm in a business trip in Texas. And I'm calling her back saying, "Get ready, because I'm going to law school." So it was an opportunity that was too good to pass up. And frankly, it was a humbling opportunity, because that the owner of the company, or certainly one of the owners of the company, it's a family-owned business to this day, chose me to invest in. That was a pretty heady, almost surreal opportunity. And it was like opportunity knocks. You generally try to give it a wide open door, right? Because you never know when this is going to come around again. So I applied to law school. I took the LSAT exam, got in, and for 4 years worked during the day at Mossberg and went to school at night for law. And I got out in 01, passed the bar, and they put me in as corporate counsel. And a couple of years later was promoted to vice president and general counsel. And that was, again, 2003 or 4. So I didn't leave there until 2018, so it was several years as a vice president, a various senior vice president, executive vice president, and general counsel, and still director of technical services, keeping my hands in the engineering and quality field to help, where I could, because I had a lot of experience there. So it's kind of a really not a traditional road, but when there was an issue with product and there's lawyers involved, there was nobody in the world. I don't want to brag on myself, but because of my work, because of my work from the very beginning on these products, there was nobody in the world that knew the product better than I did. Maybe Alan Mossberg, but as far as a guy that was doing it hands-on for years, there was no plaintiff's expert in the world that could pull the wool over my eyes. And I just wanted to get the truth out. Right? Here's the facts. Here's what we do. We're very proud of this product. So that was, I think it worked out. It certainly worked out well for me, because it gave me opportunities to see and go places and do things that I would never have ordinarily been able to do under any realistic circumstance. So, and I think I like to believe that the company received value from my expertise and my ability to work and do what I had to do for them.
Well, now you got to
When was
close
you
the loop and tell us how you found NSSF, but maybe Mike's
right?
asking that anyway.
No. I want to go there, but I also want to know when the first SHOT Show was for you, and then
Oh,
obviously we got to get that story and how you end up. I mean, were you ever at SHOT Show going, no, one day I'll be the president of this?
No, not even close. I think the first SHOT Show was probably back in the early '90s. It was either Dallas. It might have been Dallas, because in those days the SHOT Show moved around from place to place. I've been to now 25 SHOT Shows, most of them with Mossberg, of course. But the first SHOT Show I went to, coincidentally, I was actually doing a vendor audit of a vendor in Texas around the same time as SHOT Show. And one of the guys from the company, when the marketing guy said, listen, you're going to be in Texas. Why don't you come by to Dallas and go and see the SHOT Show? I said, I didn't know anything about the SHOT Show. I was not in sales or marketing. And so they, but I went to the SHOT Show, and it was, of course, it was mind blowing, because I mean, it's like, wow, this is like really, and it wasn't even compared to what we have today. It wasn't nearly as big as what we have today, but it was as impressive as anything I've ever seen. And the great news about being in the industry is you become friends with so many people that are in the industry, and to go to the SHOT Show and say, oh my gosh, there's so and so from Ruger, this is the guy from that I worked with at Winchester. It's like all of these connections that I made. It was just fantastic. And of course, at that time, I was also working on a committee for SAMI, and a lot of folks might not know what that is, but that's the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute. I happen to be currently the president and CEO of SAMI as well now, by convention of the way the job title rolled out. But I was on the Joint Technical and Firearms Committee for SAMI as a representative from Mossberg for many years, since about 1988 or so. So we got to work on developing new cartridges, new chambers, test parameters for firearms, ammunition, transportation, shipping, all of those kind of things that are behind the scenes. So the best way to describe it to maybe some of the audience that wouldn't know, if you buy a 30-06 rifle manufactured by Remington or Kimber or anybody, and then you buy 30-06 ammunition manufactured by Federal or pick a cartridge company, Winchester, you know that those things are going to be compatible, safe, interchangeable, and reliable because SAMI standardized that chamber and that cartridge. So there are hundreds and hundreds of chambers and cartridges that SAMI has created and now is part of an American national standards. So you can go online and say, I'm building a gun. I'm building a gun. I want to chamber this for, I don't know, pick any of the hundreds of cartridges, 9mm. I just pick an easy one. You can go on and get the drawings for the chamber and the cartridge and the proof loads and all the pressures and velocities and twist rates and all that stuff that SAMI promulgates through its committees made up of the companies in our industry. So SAMI is a small group, but it works through its committees, which are made up of engineers like myself and others from around the industry. So it's a really important, somewhat, not necessarily at the forefront of most people's minds, but the fact that things work the way they do with firearms and ammunition is due to SAMI, which started in 1926. So we'll be celebrating our 100-year anniversary in a couple of years. And it was actually Congress that requested that SAMI be started in the first place, because after World War I, with all the problems with ammo and guns, they said, hey, we got to find a way to fix this. So in a long-winded way, that's how I kind of got into the industry per se, like the greater industry, and got to meet a lot more people. So that was the original journey. And then how I got to NSSF as an employee, I was on the board of governors for NSSF through Mossberg for about a decade. And I had been then, where I was secretary of the board, I was chairman of the governance and nominating committee for a while, and then I became the chairman of the finance committee, which made me automatically an officer of NSSF. So I was intimately involved with their financial details and all the projects and programs they were running. And then the then CEO announced he was going to retire in 2 years, I think, or 18 months. And I was on the search committee to find the replacement. So we had hired a recruiting firm to help us find a good replacement to take over as the president and CEO of NSSF. And I did that with all due diligence. It was important for me as a board member and Mossberg as a patron member company to have good representation at NSSF. So one day I get a call from the recruiting firm that we had hired, and he said, "Okay, Joe, we've been going around. We got the ad. You help us with the job description, blah blah blah." He goes, "Do you have any suggested names for this role?" And I gave him a couple of folks in the industry that I thought would be really good. He goes, "Well, I got to disclose to you that everybody we've talked to says that you're the guy for the job." And I said, "Yeah, you're pulling my leg." I thought he was, he was horsing around because I never, it was not my intention to leave Mossberg. I was already there 32 years. I love my job. But it's got me to thinking about what if people really think that about me, maybe service to the greater industry might be appropriate for me. But I basically dismissed it I said, "No, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm not really willing to make a change right now." Fast forward a couple of months, I'm at a trade show. And of course, as a good board member, I stopped over to the NSSF booth to say hello to these folks that I'd known. And one of the guys said, the staff member said, "You ought to throw your hat in the ring because, you'd be a good guy to work with. And we think you'd be good, for the company." And when a recruiter said it, it was one thing. But when a staff member said it, it was quite a different thing. Because the implications are, ultimately I would be his boss. And for someone to say that, I thought it was like, I don't know. It's just like it became real all of a sudden that maybe there's something here. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring. I went through the whole process. I recused myself from the search committee, obviously. And I just told the board, do the right thing. Whatever that is, do the right thing. Don't pick me because you know me. Pick the best person, whoever he or she is, because it's important to the industry. And ultimately, I'm affected one way or the other, either as a representative of a board member company or as the person selected. So just do the right thing. And surprisingly to me, they made an offer. So that was I started September of 2018. So I'll be coming up on my 6-year anniversary here next month.
That's wild.
That's a really cool story.
That's exactly when I made my transition, right? From owning Eagle to doing the Walk the Talk America thing. And what I appreciate about like kind of what you said is like thinking about, like I tell people all the time, I'm way better in this role than I was just selling guns. Like there's nothing wrong with being an importer and selling a ton of guns and supporting other organizations in the industry like NRA and NSSF and everybody. But I love being where I'm at now. I love being a representative of the industry, especially when, we're able, and I'm including you in that too, like to cross over to other industries and have discussions and be able to get people to see or reframe how they see us, because I think we're one of the most stigmatized, groups.
There's no question about that. I mean, I'm very willing to talk to just about anybody on matters of mutual concern. Now, obviously, there is a line that I would never cross because I know there are certain groups and people that don't respect us. They won't listen to reason. We can't get a reasonable word out in the regular media that we call the big mainstream media. They won't carry a lot of our messaging. So we have to do it ourselves. And my job is to help the industry do well. Okay, I say, the industry's got to do well. I run a trade association to support the industry. They must do well. But I'm also trying to show that the industry is doing good. And there's a difference between doing well and doing good. We are doing good. And this, and I know we'll talk about this, our role in suicide prevention is personal to me. It's personal to a lot of people in our industry. It's personal to the veterans that make up a large percentage of our industry. So if I have an opportunity to do something for the good of society, for the good of the industry, for the good of veterans, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't we take that road. And I don't care. I mean, look, even in our own families, there are people that don't necessarily appreciate what we do, but it's because it's a gun thing, right? It becomes, there's indoctrination in schools. There's the media beating that drum constantly. And I know there are two realities in this world, right? There's a reality of the 100 million gun owners that hunt and shoot recreationally and are safe and responsible and do the right thing. And then there's the criminal element. And that's out there and that's real. And you can, not you, but I mean, there's folks that can talk about defunding the police and doing all this stuff, but if you don't do something to deal with the criminal issue as a criminal element or as a criminal justice problem, we're not going to get better. We're not going to evolve as a society and come together in a proper way for the good of everyone, including my own children and grandchildren. So I'm willing to talk to anybody on areas of mutual concern, with the understanding I'll respect your position if you respect mine, and let's see what we can find this common ground here.
And that's our podcast. Yeah. If we pivot into the safety aspect, I want to table suicide prevention for just a second. The name of the organization is the National Shooting Sports Foundation. It may have started that way, but it's so much more than that now, right? So
Yeah.
maybe paint a little bit of context for us and for the listeners to delineate between or among the various applications that NSSF has, because shooting sports for sure contain a safety component. And my personal bias is that if you want to affect safety and responsibility, start with the youth. And youth shooting sports, I think in particular, is an overlooked avenue for organizations like ours. I mean, we have Devin Perkins with Kids to Kings for sure, and we've partnered with Derek LeBlanc and ChildSafe. But there's so many like trap clubs around that I would love as a therapist who teaches emotional functioning to get into and educate on some of my bailiwicks. But there's so many other areas where you guys touch. Help us understand and maybe share some of the more prominent efforts that you have in the various, I don't want to say industries, but I guess that's the best way to frame it, in addition to shooting sports.
Yeah, well, a couple of things real quick. You talked about clay shooting and stuff. NSSF started the Scholastic Clay Target Program. We've since spun it off to other organizations that can do it justice by running it maybe more efficiently than we did. But that was something where we got young people involved, and at the school age level in traps, shooting, and skeet and sporting clays. So it's something that now has evolved and taken on a life of its own. And the clay shooting sports are among the fastest growing sports in all of high school athletics. In fact, it may be now the fastest growing sport is trap shooting. So it is something that we're very, very proud of, having been at the forefront of that for several years. But, you talked a little bit about the other industries and other things that we do. And I kind of jokingly tell people, although I'm very serious about it, for a trade association whose job it is to promote the business of firearms and ammunition, we spend an awful lot of time and money keeping people out of people's hands. Keeping guns out of people's hands. We have programs, and I would encourage people to go to nssfrealsolutions.org, because you'll see we have a program that we call Fix NICS, and that is putting the states on notice that there are disqualifying records that are not going into the background check system. And in order to have a true reliance, our members are relying on the background check system when they transfer firearms at retail. If you're going to have a real system, it's got to have good data. If it's garbage in, garbage out theory. And so we have gotten the laws changed in 16 states to make sure they include this information. Because if someone has a mental health condition that they've been diagnosed with or hospitalized, if that information is not going in the background check system, then you could inadvertently transfer a firearm to somebody who is prohibited. That's a federal crime. And it's unsafe for the community, right? It creates a real potential problem for the community. So, that's something that we're very proud to make sure that those records are robust and accurate as they can possibly be. We also have a program called Don't Lie for the Other Guy. One of the issues that we see in talking to our colleagues at the ATF is that people will come into a gun shop and buy a gun for someone who may be prohibited. That's a federal crime. So our job is to go in to educate the retailers. Here's how you spot a straw purchase. Here's how you prevent a straw purchase. We don't want these guns getting into the wrong hands, because if they do, again, the criminal element has now got a tool to create havoc in the local communities, and we certainly don't want that. We have Operation Secure Store, which is a way that we go in and help educate dealers, retailers on physically securing their store from smash and grab. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the videos on some of these smash and grab crimes, but these criminals will steal a car or a truck, tie a chain to the bumper and pull the gates off the front door of a gun shop and run in there and steal everything they possibly can. So we have experts, we have consultants that go in and do a physical assessment of a retail store and say, okay, here's where you can, bolster your security. Here's some things that we recommend. Of course, we've got Project ChildSafe, which is, 25-year. This is our 25-year anniversary. It is the largest, most comprehensive safety education program out there anywhere. We've given away 41 million safety kits to date, and that includes a gun lock. So you can go on our website, you can watch the video, you can take the tests, you can get all the free materials we have there, and then you have the lock to actually start applying those lessons about secure storage from day one. Again, 25-year anniversary, something we're extremely pleased with. And I had to testify in front of a subcommittee of the Senate a couple of years ago on federally mandated storage laws. They wanted to have federal mandates for how people store their guns. Now, NSSF is opposed to that concept. However, we are the biggest advocate for secure storage out there, and yet we're saying, but we don't want a one-size-fits-all federal mandate. We believe that people can make their own decisions, but as long as they make a decision, as long as they do it thoughtfully and carefully and with the appropriate device, whether it be a safe or a gun lock or a cable lock, whatever it is, that's, we think, is a better approach than forcing people into a one-size-fits-all thing. So, again, we talk about, yes, the shooting sports are awesome, the SHOT Show is great, all this stuff, but we also have these other elements, including suicide prevention, to say, hey, but we need to make sure we're doing it responsibly, respectfully, and carefully to make sure people are safe and children are safe. And again, those are things that we're extremely proud of, and I'm very outspoken and vocal about these programs because I think they're important and I think they're saving lives.
I can hear my peer colleagues in the healthcare community whispering in my ear, even though they're not actually in my ear, wondering about the fixed NICS, and I'd like to hover on that for a moment and ask, because we are terrified that our patient records could somehow be entered into a repository that ends up being falsified, right? So a big component of what we do is we believe that mental illness can be overcome, just like physical illness and infirmities. So while there are people who have been adjudicated, which is the language on the 4473, adjudicated, mentally ill in some sense of permanence, there are those who are not, and simply because they've dealt with post-traumatic stress injury or disorder, or they've dealt with depression, or they've dealt with anxiety, they're now recovered from that. The fear is that those who simply don't know that process is achievable and attainable and goals can be met may be inclined to include a patient's medical record that suggests that they're permanently disabled because of an anxiety disorder or something. And we don't want those falling into a NICS system and then inadvertently prohibiting an otherwise well person from, exercising their rights. So are there conversations about that and how we make sure that the two record keeping systems don't end up getting conflated? And even in some states, like I know Nevada is aiming for what they call a health, i.e. healthy, its information exchange is the i.e. healthy Nevada. They want to make sure that all providers have access to all the records, and that's fine, but there's some suspicion of like, well, whose eyes are falling on this and where does it go? So are there conversations being had among you guys and ATF or NICS or whoever's doing the repository and the record keeping about making sure that those types of medical histories aren't included in the prohibited status, shall we say?
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question, and I appreciate that. It's extremely important. One of the things that we are absolutely non-compromising on is the issue of due process, is to make sure that if someone is on a list, that they have a restoration of rights opportunity in a timely fashion to get those rights restored. That's very important. Second of all, as far as the records themselves, we don't know or advocate for any particular set of records, but we do know there are federally prohibiting um, uh, elements, right, that are on when you fill out a 4473. And what we're seeing on conversely on the other side is our members, our retailers, can't rely on the data. A gun gets transferred to someone who is or ought to be, but for their state not providing the information, ought to be prohibited. That person goes and creates a very terrible crime. Who gets blamed? The retailer. Why'd you sell the gun? But if you don't have proper data going in, you run the risk of like there's all no matter what you do, right, there's going to be a risk to somebody. Somebody is going to have to suffer in some fashion. From our perspective, we don't advocate for any additional information except for what's required by federal law to be put in. And we knew a lot of states were not putting those records in. So our retailers are like, okay, we're doing a transfer here, but can I rely on this information? I don't know. What's going to happen down the road? That could be a real problem. So we are forceful on restoration of rights. We are forceful on due process, to be sure. But I can't allow our retailers to be left hanging because of incomplete data when they do a background check that's supposed to be reliable to protect the public. So it's like a no-win. Unfortunately, it's almost a catch-22 scenario, and I appreciate that. But you won't find a stronger advocate for due process rights than NSSF, I can assure you. We oppose red flag laws because of the fact there's no due process. Not because we want to keep guns out of the hands of someone who shouldn't have them, that we do. But if you don't do something in the legislature to provide speedy, timely due process, then it's a non-starter for us.
That's good answer. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's tough because, especially in the position you're in, like Walk Talk America stands alone and we can kind of navigate. We're not as famous. We're not, you guys serve so many parts of this industry. It's like, how do you keep everybody happy? Right. Like, you can't.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. We try to do the best you can with the information you have, right? That's something I take responsibility for, but I have to look at it and say if it's a federal law and they're requiring our members to basically enforce it by doing this paperwork and doing these background checks, it's got to be right. It's got to be accurate. Otherwise, our guys are left on the hook, and we don't want that. We don't want the tragedy to ensue. I'd rather, but again, as far as getting people's rights back, we're all about that for sure.
What are we talking about? Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, there's one more question. I said, do you ever? So, like, when people look at NSSF, I think there's like different groups, right? So you have like your manufacturers. That's a completely different beast from like consumers that know who you are, right, and respect who you are, or maybe they don't respect. I know there's some people like that would. I remember like them contacting me to talk about the ATF, and I looked at it two different ways, right? I was like, look, I get it. You're like a regular gun guy. You're really into the 2A community. You want the ATF to be abolished, but like as Eagle Imports, I had to work with the ATF, right? I'm not this guy. I was responsible for employees and, millions of dollars and, helping Americans arm themselves. When the ATF showed up, it's not like I could be like, I hate you guys, go away. You know what I'm saying?
You can't do that.
No, it's like I always look at people that says like, well, you had the opportunity to tell them to F off. And I'm like, okay, tough guy, from your keyboard in your Instagram posts.
Yeah. I mean, look, you could tell them to go away. You could, and then they will pull your license and you'll be out of business. You and all of your employees will be out in the street.
Exactly.
So,
and the guy on Instagram is not going to help out.
Oh, no, they're not going to help. Look, I would say this. In my career, now this is going on 38 or 9 years directly in the industry. I've worked with all levels of ATF folks. When I was at Mossberg, I was responsible for like the background check. I mean, I should say the what do you call them?
The traces.
I'm sorry, the trace. I was responsible for, for help make sure the traces got done. And of course, our systems, our computer systems, our record keeping, all that stuff is ATF required. And if I had a question or problem, I pick up the phone and call the ATF, the local guys, and they would come right down. And they were great. They were great. They were helpful. They were insightful. They wanted us to do the right thing, and but they wanted to make sure that we follow the law. That's part of the deal of being in the industry is you must follow the law, otherwise you won't be in the industry for long, and you may be behind bars under certain circumstances. So you don't want that. So I did not grow up with an automatic fear of ATF. I would say that in my career there were maybe one or two instances where I was really sideways on a particular issue. Especially when I became a lawyer and like really got into the regulations and the legal aspects of it, there were, reasonable people can disagree. And if you ask, 5 lawyers about one statute or regulation, you might get 10 different answers or opinions, right? It's just the nature of the beast of being an attorney in this space. But, my concern today is different than it was 35 years ago. Today, it appears that even though I've got great relationships, I think, with a lot of folks at ATF, from all the way down from the director, to other folks as well, that I respect what they have to do. My concern is that it tends to be a little bit more hostile environment where, like, I would be, and I told the director of ATF, I would be less reluctant today to pick up the phone and call ATF to ask a question, just because it's been weaponized through the zero tolerance policy. And that's unfortunate, because if the real aim is community safety, which I believe it is, I really truly believe that ATF's mission is ultimately the safety of our communities and keeping guns out of the wrong hands and prosecuting criminals that do the wrong thing with guns. I get all that, but the people in the industry are your allies. These are people that can actually make a difference. They can help you. If there's something going on, they see a straw purchase is happening, or someone's stealing guns out of the back of the factory. The manufacturer or the distributor or the retailer, they could be your best line of defense in terms of getting those guns recovered, getting them out of the hands of criminals. And to alienate them is, I think, counterproductive. And I don't want to get in. This is not political. I don't want to be political about this, but I'm a pragmatic guy. I'm a pretty practical person. I've always tried to be anyway. And I think you get more by collaborating in terms of public safety than you do by being belligerent to each other. And when the ATF comes in to do an inspection, you cannot deny them access. If you have a license to work in this space, that's part of the deal. It comes with the license, and talk is cheap. People could say, "Oh, why don't you just tell them to go, jump in a lake or get out of here?" And talk is cheap. If you have a job that requires, or you're employing a bunch of people and you're in money invested in inventory, you jeopardize all of that by being belligerent and locking them out. That's against the law. And I mean, I don't want to get into this. I know this is maybe not the right forum, but I'm concerned about creating an animosity that doesn't need to be there, because at the end of the day, it's about public safety. At the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing. We all have family, children, grandchildren. We all live and work in the same communities. So there's nothing wrong with saying we can agree to disagree, but we're going to follow the law to keep guns out of the wrong hands. I'm okay with that.
That really resonates with me, because I have a license from my state licensing board. I'm beholden to the regulations imposed upon me by my clearing the throat and raising my hand and saying, yes, I'll sign on for this compliance. And I don't get to just flout that like I want to. If I disagree, I can just let go of my license and call myself a consultant or a life coach or whatever. You can't do that in the firearms community, because it's regulated at the federal level, right? And I guess I'm trying to figure out, and I swear this will be the last question on this particular topic before we shift gears, but when we do background checks for my people, sometimes, as you illustrated, states don't talk to each other, states don't talk to the feds don't talk to the states, and we'll end up with a clear background check on one end, and then later some insurance company will run their own background check and be like, oh, you had this violation when you were 18 years old for drinking underage in Topeka, Kansas. And then all of a sudden there's a halt put on the credentialing process. What type of infrastructure are we still lacking to make sure that all systems are talking to each other?
Wow, that's another great question. I mean, part of it is there does seem to be a disconnect between the states, even amongst agencies within their own states.
Oh yeah,
that they
yeah,
don't, yeah,
for sure.
as you know, right, as you mentioned, they don't communicate, and whether there needs to be kind of a top-down review of best practices that can be employed. And truthfully, the industry does a much better job, I think, than the federal agencies or the state agencies. I think private sector communication technology is certainly much more evolved, at least in my experience, based on what I've seen, than any of my friends that work in the government. So I think you need to bring in more private sector folks to take a look at this and say, hey, wait a second, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And here's a system or a tool that exists that private companies are using that maybe hasn't found its way to the government sector for whatever reason. But I would say get subject matter experts that are not from the government to come in and take a look as though it were a business. Run it like it's a business. Like you really had to have profit and loss calculations and all that. If you ran it like a business, a lot of this stuff wouldn't fall through the cracks, and you certainly would have, I think, much more effective and meaningful, accurate, above all, communications. So that would be if I were king for a day, that's kind of what I would do.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we run into similar problems here in our field. I mean, I look at something like telehealth across state lines, which is, for all intent and purpose, expressly prohibited by every single state, even though we all have the same skill set and ostensibly took the same examination to provide care. And we have these arcane laws that say, nope, as soon as you cross this geopolitical border, you're no longer competent or whatever. It's very, very bizarre. And I think if we all got together, that would be solved. And certain things are in place, like interstate compacts for psychologists or counselors or whatever. Perhaps we can do that here. I don't know how much the political temperature needs to be turned down. Maybe we all just need to get off Twitter. I don't know, but that's certainly a workable solution, and it dovetails nicely into what I think you're here to discuss today on our Guns and Mental Health podcast, which is the collaborative efforts among and between organizations to address mental illness and bridge the gap between two communities, firearms and mental health care, that have long stood opposed to each other, presumably, or in appearance at least, across this like self-imposed chasm. So help us understand why mental health would be important to NSSF, separate and apart from simply suicide intervention at the time of crisis and firearm suicide. Like what makes this important to you and your folks?
Well, one of the things that we always talk about is like we are part of the same community as everybody else. Everyone has mental health like they have physical health. We all know that. We've said that 100 times. But these are our friends and our neighbors and our family members, and we want to do the right thing. And if that means taking interest in how someone is doing mentally, well, I think we should do that. And I think having an awareness of someone who might own a firearm, but then also might be going through a life crisis, temporary or maybe long-term, that could be, not always, but it could be a very bad combination, even over a short duration of time. Because I understand, and I'm not, certainly not a doctor, but we understand from what we've seen and from our partners that the time between suicidal ideation and an action is many times very brief. So what we try to do with our secure storage messaging is to say, look, put that time between the thought and the trigger, as we say. And trust me when I tell you, I can sure your phones are lighting up or your lines are. People say, well, I need my gun, my home protection. I need my gun. And believe me, you're not going to get an argument from me because right, I'm in that same world. And I tell people, and I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. But if the gun is your only means of protection in your house, you need to rethink your plan. I'm a blunt guy. I'm a pretty honest guy, and I say, so make sure you have good locks on your home. Make sure you have lights. You even if you don't have a camera, put a sign that says we've got cameras. Make a deterrent for people that want to come into your house unannounced. Okay, besides just having the gun, because I can tell you that in my own experience, it is certainly possible that someone's can kick in my door and attack my wife or I. It's certainly possible. But it is 100% certainty that my grandchildren are going to be visiting my house every week. So if I don't have a plan to balance out personal protection and the safety of my own grandchildren, then I've failed. I'm failing somewhere. Luckily, with the technology that's available today, there are biometric lock boxes and key fob lockbox and all sorts of things that will prevent the curious grandchild or child or neighbor or somebody, but also give you very quick access, a matter of seconds. So if your outer perimeter, your locks, your lights, your cameras, whatever you have, give you a matter of 30 seconds, that should be enough time to access your lawfully owned self-defense firearm. And so I know it's a very complex thing, but I've had this discussion, I've had this debate with many of my friends in the gun world, and I respect that. I respect their positions. I don't support mandates for storage. I just think you got to think about your circumstances. And I'll tell you just a story about this, and I don't want to beat this to death, but years ago I was shooting in a pistol league, and the guy that was our team captain owned a firearm, of course, needed a pistol. His neighbor came to the house, and without my friend knowing it, took his pistol, brought it back to his own home, and died by suicide using that pistol. That is something that kind of never left me. That situation never left me. So when I hear people talking about, yeah, I want to keep my gun on the counter, I keep my gun on the top of the refrigerator, or in the drawer there by my kitchen sink. Yeah, you can do that, but who else knows it's there, and who's going to find it? And if someone does find it, the chances are it could be a problem. And my friend was never the same. His heart was broken, and I don't blame him, because we all felt that pain of his grief. And so, I don't want to have regrets. I want to be smart. I want to make sure that I do the right thing, and I want to just, use my thought process to create the best plan that I can under all the possible scenarios. So I don't. That's maybe a long-winded way to deal with this question, but I think it has to be said that if a gun is your only means, then you need to have a plan. You need to have something alternative to that, because I think that's a gun is important. It's important in my life. It's important in my home defense plans, but it's not the only thing. It's part of a bigger thing.
Yeah, and I think that most gun owners can get behind the whole be prepared, right? Because we train all the time, and when we take courses, we're always, and I feel like when it comes to sometimes the responsibility aspect, we slip up there a little bit. And I don't know what that is, but like one of the campaigns that Walk the Talk America always says is train as hard retrieving your firearm from its locked position as you do training with your firearm, right?
Yeah,
we'll train all day, we'll take AR courses, we'll do all this stuff, but somehow we act like we can't train to go retrieve it. And I do it all the time. I mean, there's a firearm right now underneath my desk, and I run my fingers right over the keypad. I've been doing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can, it's like Stevie Wonder playing piano. I can do it in my sleep,
Yep.
But one of the things that I think people need to understand, and it's for guys like us right on this call, is we understand that every negative outcome of a firearm is going to be used against us.
And it is.
Yeah,
absolutely it is.
It is. And we're not here to say we're compromising, we're doing this. We're just trying to reduce those negative outcomes, because we got to fight this on two fronts. The VA, all the suicide prevention, all the mental health organizations are looking towards NSSF and Walk Talk America and any other organization that's within the firearms industry. And you could list them all, right? And you can even list the influencers like Chris Chang, but they look for us to be superheroes. They want us, sometimes I say it's like they feel like we have some kind of magic wand, and we're working towards reducing negative outcomes. And we've been doing that long before they start paying attention to us.
Yep.
That's more so than, but it just really puts, it's a really interesting position, because I feel, I really feel like we could be the leaders in this space. And I've always gotten to the point where I'm like, I look at, I'll say this, okay? I'm not saying that you feel this way, but I almost look at sometimes in the room, and I'm like, you can only advise me at this point. And I'm talking to everybody outside of the industry, right? we have our programs, we have the direction, we're the ones that can come up with the innovative thoughts, like, hey, let's get somebody to do this, or what if we did this, or what if we had this cohesive message. And it's like, I feel like at this point everybody else is kind of like, okay, what's next, or what can you guys do? And that's a huge responsibility for us. You know what I mean? That's why I've always appreciated your, when I'm watching them, that what they want from you, Joe. And I'm like, man, I can't imagine what Joe's day is like, because I can call Jake every day and we can work on suicide prevention and better mental health, right? Like that's what I'm here for. That's what the job entails. You got to go back to the office, and now you're taking calls from all the 50 different things that you got to make sure are running smoothly. So I just wanted to give you your flowers. I appreciate, what you have to go through.
Well, like I said, I am very mindful of the fact that I represent a number of constituencies, and I take that role more serious than you could possibly imagine. And I understand that there is a conflict, there is a friction between, I want instant access 24/7 to my firearm. I get that. There's something to be said for that. I would never dispute that. But I'm a very pragmatic guy, and I have to look at how my life experiences have informed me, and what I think is probably a better outcome is just think about how you're storing your firearm, because it may not be you, but it may be your child, your grandchild, someone who's going through a crisis, a neighbor. I saw this. My friend was broken. My friend was brokenhearted, and it killed me to see him so down. But like a lot of people that are probably listening in, I've lost family members to suicide, including suicide by firearm. Okay, I was an eyewitness to his suicide. Okay, if that doesn't inform your worldview on how I can help, maybe I could save a life. I couldn't save this other gentleman. I couldn't. I look back and say, it was something that haunted me. Is why couldn't I have done more to help this man? But it informs me, saying we can do more. I have now the opportunity to talk. And as a board member of NSSF, when NSSF got involved in suicide prevention, I was on the board. Okay, so I was supportive of the concept, never imagining that one day I would have to sell it. Right? I would have to be that guy on the point of this very uncomfortable discussion. And don't make no mistake, it's not something that people talk about. Okay, it's an uncomfortable thing, but I look at it and say it's the right thing to do. And I think that if people take a step back from the political viewpoint and say, yeah, okay, we in the gun industry are the most trusted messengers on firearms and suicide prevention. I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm not telling you something that maybe you haven't heard from me before. But when my kids came back from overseas, both are veterans. Both my sons are veterans. They told me, I'm not talking to the VA about what we did or what we saw or what we experienced, because I'll take my guns away. I mean, as the father of two veterans that have lived through what they lived through, I'm like, that's breaking my heart and terrifying to me, because I know the stats for suicide by veteran suicide, and I didn't want to hear this. So if I and our team and our industry can be that messenger, maybe I can prevent somebody from having a bad outcome, just because they trust me more than they trust other folks. And we know there's been a rub between the medical community and the gun community for years. This is not new. It's not going away either, by the way. The fact that there are people at VA that are willing to talk with us, willing to help us and to educate us and allow us to educate their people, that's a big step. 10 years ago, that would have been impossible. Okay? And I can tell you my first meeting with the VA as the CEO of NSSF, there was a conference in San Francisco. You were there, I think, Mike.
Jake and I both were there.
Right.
Jake and I both.
It was 2020. I had just become the CEO of NSSF. I was the president already, but they just promoted me to CEO on January 1 of 2020, just in time for COVID. Lucky me. But so I went to this conference, and I was scared to death about presenting. And I had a very matter-of-fact PowerPoint on our public-private partnerships and what we do with other organizations on safety and all that stuff. I had no intention to talk about my experiences with suicide in my own life, and my own, again, things that I had seen. I had no intention of talking about that because it was deeply personal. I had put that deep in a place that it was never coming out in my mind, right? I never wanted to talk about it. It was buried deeply. But I heard other people talk about their experiences as I was waiting for my turn to speak, and it gave me the courage, the permission, if you will, to say, and here's why it affects me, and here's how it affects me personally. So I said things I never said before in public about what I saw in this suicide that I witnessed, and it was almost cathartic. Uh, but it gave me a purpose. It gave people, I think, that connection to me and our industry that might not have ordinarily existed or been created. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but I suspect it might have been because, again, there are areas we're not going to agree on things, but let's find the common ground and let's help to save lives because I think we can, and I'm committed to doing so.
I just, like 2 days ago, for whatever reason, I recovered my note card from that conference, and I literally wrote VA NSSF ATF NSSF partnership. And then parenthetically, I put 20 years ATF NSSF and 2019 for VA NSSF. So like, I still have the notes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I want to be mindful of time. We got a few minutes still, but we need to talk about your initiatives and what NSSF is doing. We're recording this in August, but it'll be published in about a week. We're just in time for Suicide Prevention Month, which is September. So, speak about what's going on in your realm, please.
Yeah, we've got a couple of exciting things that we've just recently launched. One is called Gun Storage Check Week. And that is basically a media blitz whereby we tell gun owners to take stock, take inventory, not inventory like physical inventory, but take a stock or take a worldview of how you are storing your firearms. Maybe that your life situation has changed. Maybe you welcome a new addition to the family. Maybe whatever. But just take a check to make sure it's secure. Our tagline is "Make sure it's secure." We've got logos, social media promotions, digital ads, infographics, PSAs, video resources. And I encourage your listeners to go to gunstoragecheck.org. Gunstoragecheck.org. Please do see what we've got there. There are things you can lift right from the website and use with your own organizations. There's PSAs, like all sorts of things. Please go there and see because it runs from September 1 through September 7. And it's designed that way to correspond with Suicide Prevention Month. We think it's a great campaign. We don't preach. We just show you options. These are the various options you can use to secure your firearm when it's not being used. That's what that is. The other one that we have, more specific to suicide prevention, is called braveconversation.org. Braveconversation.org is a compendium of materials, videos, checklists, and so on and so forth, resources for folks to prevent suicide. We've taken all of our materials from our websites at NSSF, plus what we've gotten from VA and AFSP. We've put them into one easy-to-find landing spot, and again, it's all free. We want people to use it. We want people to go there to see what we have, and then let them use it. And I've used this quote before, but I think it's important kind of to show you where my head is at in terms of what we're trying to do with the industry. And the quote is that no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And collectively, Walk the Talk America, the VA, the AFSP, NSSF, all of these groups that are out there, they all want to do the right thing, but no one can do everything. It's a daunting task. It's a big thing, right? But everyone knows somebody. So we had a conference a few weeks ago in DC. Mike was there, and we had representatives from the firearm industry in the same room as veteran service organizations, in the same room as media folks, in the same room as VA clinicians. Now, those are people that probably wouldn't ordinarily get together and have a beer, right? They may have different worldviews or different experiences, but the fact that we were there together, talking about how we each in our own communities can make a difference and spread the word and save lives, it was inspiring. It was inspiring to me and I think to others. And so, I know I've got a job, right? I've got the SHOT Show. I've got, we have a big election coming up. I mean, it's all these things that I'm working on. I never lose sight of the fact that our community, our industry, our world is made up of human beings, and they're all different, but we all have this common aim, I think, of being in safe communities and being, doing the right thing and being successful. And I think by spreading the word on mental health, suicide prevention, secure storage, we're doing a little bit, our little part to help that go along. And that's all I'm trying to do here with this messaging. And I so appreciate you giving me a forum to talk about some of the things that we're doing, because frankly, I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, no, Joe, I appreciate that. And I think you've always been so kind when it comes to Walk the Talk America and having me at the events. And I know I was a little quiet last time. I was just trying
You
to were. I know. You know what it was? Like I said, I felt like I was receiving so much love from everybody that was speaking that I kind of was like, everybody was like, hey, Walk Talk America's here. Or I felt like I had a finger in almost everything. Like even Emmy's video was comprised of many people that work with Walk the Talk America. So no, but I think it's great. I truly think we can be the leaders in this space, our industry. I know it sounds crazy because it's counterintuitive to think like, how is the firearms industry going to be the leaders in suicide prevention and mental health? Like there's mental health organizations out there that are supposed to be experts in that. But I feel like because of our valuable space and the people that we can touch, we can get there. And I think that gives a lot of firearms owners hope. Like I'm talking about the average everyday firearm owner that's like into the Second Amendment, because I feel like sometimes we're like wounded ducks, right? Like the people are like, we don't have a voice. No one listens to us. No one cares. We try to do the right thing. Everyone calls us baby killers or standing on graves, or we're only about profit and all that stuff. But I do think that the tide is shifting. I think it's, I do like to just some of my personal experiences with Walk the Talk America, and even in the media, I'm starting to see a little bit of a tide shift. And I think NSSF is going to be, it's a big part of that, especially with the way that some of the other organizations have kind of fallen on bad PR, right? We think about what's happened with the NRA over the years and whether it's justified in some people's head or unjustified. Somebody has to pick up the torch and carry it. And, I just want to say that I appreciate what you do. But I have one question for you that I'm really excited to hear this answer. How do you tend to your mental health, Joe? How do you tend to your mental health?
The truth is, I really am proud of the industry. I'm proud of the job that I have. I take it very seriously. But I have to on the weekends when I do less emails, not no emails, but less emails. I like to hang out with my grandkids, and I remember, like, I try to kind of relive my youth and run around like I did with their parents when they were kids, and it helps me to put things in perspective. It's stress. There's a lot of stress. My wife is a great sounding board. And my kids are, I'm so proud of they're all, thank God, productive people, and they have their own families now. But if I could impart just something to make the place, the world a little bit better, I think to our community, it's not mutually exclusive. That gun ownership, mental health, secure storage, all these things, they can coexist. And they should coexist, because I think it's part of being a responsible gun owner. And, I love to shoot sporting clays. I mean, that's my thing, trap, skeet, sporting clays. I got a new rifle that I can't wait to go sight in. And so those are things that kind of keep me engaged, happy, and maybe on this side of sane, I guess, because because this stuff, we got a lot of irons in the fire. And again, to be partly responsible for sharing the message for a industry like ours, that's something that it's important. I don't take it for granted. And the 400,000 jobs that our industry has and has created, I feel a sense of duty to do the right thing for them. And it keeps me focused, and I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm living the dream, man. I got to experience this industry from the earliest ages to right now, to where I am. And I mean, I'm the luckiest guy out there. I'll be honest with you.
Thanks. This has been really enlightening for me, and a real privilege, and I don't take that lightly either. I mean, the way that Mike has shepherded me through this process has been really humbling, and I'm very grateful. And I get to have conversations with people like you and learn more to apply in my own life. I think these types of discussions will ripple across the rest of the listening audience and hopefully transform what we're trying to do to just make Earth better and keep people healthy so they don't slide into that crisis state. And if you're listening and you're taking something away from this, please share it. Don't just keep it to yourself, because it doesn't do any good locked up in our own heads. So thank you, Joe. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to share and carve a little bit out of your day to make it happen, because it's really important that we model for others what we're trying to accomplish. And I think this is a good demonstration of that. So appreciate all the work that you've done, your history in the industry. That was really fascinating to hear, and how you're tirelessly efforting to find new ways and innovate more opportunities for cool things that not only advance economy and industry, but also humanity. And I think that's really cool. So thank you very much. And we should probably wrap now. It's probably a good place to stop.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike. I worked with your uncle years ago when I was at Mossberg. So your name, your history goes back a long way with me. So again, I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thanks. And on behalf of our entire Walk the Talk family, including producer/marketing guru Kevin in the background, who you can't see today, we wish you all great mental wellness. Bye-bye.